Chess YouTube, what is happening? In today's video, we're looking at a brilliant game played between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura in the 2020 Magnus Carlsen Kiva Tour Finals. Now, in this game, Magnus, as you know, being the greatest troll ever, he plays the Alekhine's opening with one knight to f6, the greatest troll opening in the history of the game. But Hikaru, not to be outdone, he launches a vicious kingside attack, kickstarted with the moves here, h4, and then two moves later, bishop to f6. Absolutely brilliant stuff. This game was insane. You don't want to miss how it ends. All right, in the game, Hikaru playing as what? Opens 1e4, and now Magnus on move 1. Of course, he plays the Alekhine's opening, the greatest troll opening in the history of the game. You don't play this at the highest level, let alone versus Hikaru Nakamura, your longtime rival. All right, in the game, Hikaru, e5 is the move, knight d5, then d4, and then d6. So far, very, very standard stuff. And now white here is a wide variety of responses. The classical line, maybe the strongest overall, is simply knight f3, bishop e2, and castles, a very simple, solid line. But instead, Hikaru in this game goes for the absolute most aggressive option humanly possible. That is the 4 pawns attack with the move c4 and then f4. Here we go. c4 drives back the knight. Knight to b6 is the move. And then finally f4. The 4 pawns attack named after the 4 very aggressive pawns in the center of the board. It's move 5. And so far, Hikaru has literally only played pawn moves in this game. Now, Magnus, right here, he takes on e5, d takes, and then f takes, and then bishop to f5. Magnus, his plan is very, very simple. Bishop f5, e6, bishop e7, and then castles, playing something like this, getting overall a solid position. But of course, Hikaru is going to have those beautiful pawns in the center, and that does give him a massive edge out of the opening if he can defend the center properly. Hikaru, he continues. Knight to c3, then e6, knight to f3, and then here, Magnus, the main move here for black, well, there's 2 main moves. Knight c6 and bishop e7 are both very, very strong, but the idea is knight c6, bishop e7, castles, and so on. But instead, Magnus here, he completely mixes things up and plays the very aggressive-looking move, bishop b4, immediately attacking with the bishop, pinning the knight on c3 to the king on the e1 square. And what is the idea here? Is Magnus trying to capture on c3 and double white's pawns in the spirit of the Nimzo-Indian defense? We'll have to wait and find out. Now, Hikaru, bishop e2 is the move, playing very, very solid. Of course, there were other options. Bishop d3 is also good, and you can even go a3 here, attacking the bishop and forcing bishop takes c3 in one go. Instead, bishop e2 played in the game, developing, likely intending castling on the king's side. Now, black here. What does Magnus have in store? Well, he plays the move c5. Now, this move right here is very, very aggressive. Black already on move 9, attacking the white center with everything he's got. And this move is very common in the Nimzo-Indian defense, but it's a lot less common in the Alekhine's opening, at least right here in this kind of position. Now, how does Hikaru want to respond? He plays a very strong move, a3. Now, the idea behind this move is very, very simple. If black takes on c3, white takes back with the b pawn, and then the b pawn does defend d4. That way, if black takes on d4, white takes back, and bang, white still has the very strong pawn on d4, defending the center, including e5. Now here, black does take. We have bishop takes, then b takes, and now again, the pawn on d4, at least for right now, is being supported. However, black does have plenty of ways to pile on pressure, including, for example, knight c6, queen d7, rook to d8 or c8. Black's going to have plenty of options later in this game to attack the white center. Now, we have knight c6, castles, and castles. All right, so far, the opening phase of the game is mostly over. What is going on? Again, the key feature here of the game is, of course, the very, very big, strong white center with these 4 pawns here smack dab in the center of the board. Now, black's plan is simple. He must attack these pawns as quickly as possible. If he does not do that, then white is going to simply steamroll black in the center and maybe on the king side as well. All right, from here, Hikaru, bishop e3. Support in the center, a very solid move. And now Magnus, he's got to find some way to continue. How does he want to pile on pressure onto the white center? There are plenty of good moves here. For example, queen d7 is solid. Rook c8, pressuring c4 indirectly is also solid. And bishop g6, also solid, getting this piece back to a more safe square. Now, instead, Magnus here plays a very, very aggressive move. Again, seen very often in the Nimzo-Indian defense, the Catalan opening, and many other openings. And he plays the move knight to a5, attacking the pawn on c4 with these 2 knights. All right, Hikaru, how do you defend the pawn? Actually, it turns out it's not that easy. The only really good move to defend is the move knight d2, and Hikaru plays it in the game. But here's the problem. Just look at this. The knight blocks d2, and d2 is almost always the standard square for the queen in this line. The queen obviously can't go to c2 as the bishop controls that square. So where is the queen gonna go? Hikaru, what on earth are you planning here? All right, Magnus, bishop g6, a solid move, getting the piece back to a much safer square where it does defend the king side very, very well. And Hikaru, what on earth, again, is your plan going to be right here in this position? It's actually not that easy to find the right plan. The computer here gives insane ideas like rook to f4, for example, as being the strongest, somehow supporting d4 and so on. But instead, Hikaru plays a more human-looking move that turns out to be a big mistake. He plays the move queen to e1. Now, to me, this move makes perfect sense. The queen belongs on the king side from here on e1. It's eyeing squares like g3 and h4, key squares on the king side, which it will need to launch an attack against the black king on g8. However, this is not the way forward, and Magnus finds an absolutely insane, diabolical way to use his knights to pile on even more pressure on the white position. He plays the move knight to a4. Magnus Carlsen putting both of his knights on the edge of the board, but it works out perfectly. This knight on a4, pressuring c3, this one pressuring c4, and now the c3 pawn is completely undefended. And how do you defend that pawn right here? Hikaru plays the move knight to f3, defending with the queen for now, which does make sense. But now, Magnus, knight to b2 is the move. Magnus Carlsen going knight from b6 to a4 to b2 to still pressure c4 somehow, and somehow it all works out in the game. All right, Hikaru, what do you want to do about the pawn on c4? If you go back to d2, that looks stupidly awkward. Instead, he plays bishop g5 in the game, attacking the queen, Magnus queen d7, and now here, how do you proceed? Again, a move like knight d2 is simply too passive. A black could go, for example, rook to c8, pressuring c4 indirectly with the rook, and that would be absolutely devastating. Instead, Hikaru here, right here, he decides it is time to continue the attack, and he plays the move queen to h4. This was the idea behind bishop g5 after all, knocking the queen off this diagonal, and then flying in queen to h4 like this, trying to spearhead the attack. However, here, Magnus, he's got everything under control. And by the way, in case you were curious, the computer line right here for white, the strongest line, is actually h4, and if black blocks the h-pawn with h5, then g4, giving up a pawn and spearheading the attack on the king side. Wild stuff. Instead, queen h4 played in the game. Black here, he takes on d4, c takes, then c takes, and then knight b takes c4. Magnus Carlsen is officially up one pawn in this game, and he does have the very, very important 2 versus 1 majority on the queen side, meaning if this game reaches the endgame phase of the game, black will be in complete control. Therefore, Hikaru, he is simply all in. There is no turning back. He's burned the bridges. He must attack the black king with everything that he's got. Now, how should he continue the attack right here? There are a lot of logical moves. For example, king to h1. Prophylaxis makes a lot of sense. Also, rook a to d1 or e1 makes a lot of sense, bringing the last piece into the attack. Instead, in the game, queen to g4 was chosen, with the idea being lining up the queen on g4 with the king on the g8 square. A very, very strong idea. Now black, queen d5, centralizing his queen, pressuring these pawns, and so on. Now, Hikaru, rook a to e1, again, bringing the last piece into the attack. This guy knows when you're attacking, the #1 rule of the attack is bring all of the pieces into the attack. Now black, rook a c8, Magnus doing the exact same thing, bringing the last piece into the game. And now here, Hikaru, he lights the board on fire with a series of very, very aggressive moves, starting with the alpha 0 move, h4. The threat right here is simply h5, maybe even h6, softening up those dark squares. Therefore, black here, all right, Magnus, the GOAT, he sees the threat. h5 is the move, shutting down the advance of the alpha 0 h-pawn, and the queen must move here. Queen g3 is chosen, and now here black picks up a second pawn on the queen side. Knight takes a3. Magnus Carlsen has 2 passed pawns on the queen side. Obviously, the endgame would be dead lost. Therefore, Hikaru, he must continue the attack. He must keep going. There is no turning back. And here he plays the absolutely insane-looking idea With the move bishop to f6, Hikaru Nakamura, what have you done? An absolutely brilliant move right here. Now, what is the idea? First of all, what happens if black takes the bishop? If black takes on f6, there is no immediate win. However, the threat, sooner or later, is queen to g5 to h6 to g7 checkmate. Magnus here, he does not like the side of that at all, and instead plays the move knight to c2, ignoring the bishop and bringing the knight over to the attack of the d4 pawn. Now, real fast, I do want to point out, if black took on f6, white does not have a forced win, as black can defend against the threat of queen g5 to h6 to g7 checkmate like this. Rook c3. And if, say, queen to f4, threatening queen h6, black can go queen to e4. And if queen to h6, the move here is queen to e3, attacking the king and the queen and defending against the threat. So, black way back here has the option of taking on f6, but instead, Magnus, knight to c2 is the move instead, pressuring the weak d4 pawn. Now, Hikaru, bishop d3. A very strong move, attacking the knight and the bishop, and the threat here is if black is dumb enough to capture on d3, that would lead to checkmate in literally one move on g7. Therefore, black cannot do that. Instead, black here takes the rook on the e1 square. Knight takes e1. Hikaru giving up the exchange as well to continue the attack. Hikaru is now down the exchange and 2 pawns on the queen side. He's giving up everything to attack the black king. All right, black here, queen d7. The queen slides back. And now Hikaru, when you're down the exchange and 2 pawns, what do? Well, you give up even more material to continue the attack, of course. He plays the move d5 here, giving up the d5 pawn. Hikaru, what have you done? What is the idea? It's very simple. This move deflects the queen away from the defense of the king side. If black takes on d5 like this, queen takes. The idea for white is bishop takes, f takes, and then queen takes, and the g7 pawn is under attack. Hikaru would be threatening mate in one move. That is the idea. Now, instead, right here, Magnus, he plays the move rook to c3. Now, this move, the idea behind it, of course, you're pressuring d3. And again, the reason you couldn't take on d3 with the bishop is that would lead to mate in one move. Now, the problem with this move is white can take on g6, and that would be very strong. Instead, rook e3 played in the game. Hikaru defends the bishop, and this is a massive mistake, because here Magnus plays the absolutely brilliant idea of rook takes d3, giving back the exchange to blunt the attack. Here, white takes on d3, and of course, again, black cannot capture on d3, as that again would lead to mate. Instead, he takes on d5, e takes, and Magnus, in this position, is up literally 3 pawns on the queen side. All right, Hikaru, he's still all in. He must continue the attack. What does he do? He plays the move e6, giving up pawn number 4 to open up this diagonal for the attack. Magnus here, he takes on e6 with the queen. Queen takes, and then bishop d4 is the move, sliding back. Of course, the piece was finally under attack by the queen on e6. So, bishop d4 played in the game, retreating and defending. Now Magnus, knight c6, attacks the bishop. Hikaru, how do you want to proceed? Well, finally, the rook on d3. Well, Hikaru decides it is finally time to defend the rook on d3, and he plays the very simple move rook d2. Of course, the rook on d3 was not under attack yet. The bishop on g6 cannot take on d3, as that would lead to mate. However, with the pressure on the bishop on d4, sooner or later, that would be a threat, and therefore rook d2 makes a lot of sense right here for white. Now, black plays the move queen g4, blocking the attack on g7, and of course, trying to trade off queens. And Hikaru, he knows if the queens come off the board, he's as good as done. He is simply cooked, and therefore queen to f2 is the only move that he can make to keep the queens on the board. Now here, Magnus, bishop e4, a very aggressive move, lining up that piece with the knight, and of course also with the pawn on the g2 square. Now, Hikaru, knight to e5 is the move, jumping up with the knight. Now here, of course, black can take on e5 if he wants to, and in the game he does. We have knight takes, then bishop takes, and then rook c8, bringing the last piece into the attack against the white king. How the tables have turned. The hunter has become the hunted, as rook c1 is now a very serious threat against the white king on g1. All right, Hikaru, he sees this. King h2 is the move, getting off the back rank in advance, and now black f6 attacks the bishop on the e5 square. Now, bishop d4 defends the bishop, and now with the pawn on a7 under attack, black must defend with either, say, a6, a5, or b6, and black plays the latter. b6 played in the game, defending the pawn on the a7 square. Now, we have rook a2 sliding over and attacking the weak pawn on a7. That is met by rook c2, attacking both the rook and the queen, and forcing the rooks off the board immediately. We have rook takes, bishop takes, and now here, of course, both minor pieces are under attack, the bishop and the bishop. So Hikaru, how does he navigate this position right here? Well, he plays the very, very strong move. Bishop takes f6, winning a pawn, and then taking on c2, winning a pawn in the process. Now we have g takes, and then queen takes c2, and finally queen takes h4, winning the pawn on the h4 square and attacking the white king on h2. Now, king g1, the king slides back, queen d1, once again attacking the king on g1, king to h2, queen to e5, king to h1, and now king g7. Magnus Carlsen, he's done it. He's up literally 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns in the endgame. Can he convert it to victory? Let's find out. We have queen to c6, flying in. d4, queen b7, attacks the king, king to h6, and then queen takes a7. Hikaru trying to clean up these pawns on the queen side, but is it too little, too late? d3, Magnus, he knows past pawns must be pushed. His plan is so simple. Push this pawn down the board all the way to the d1 square. Now we have queen d7, sliding over, attacking the pawn, but it turns out taking on b6 was the last chance to defend in this game. Instead, queen d7 played, then queen to e1, attacks the king on the h1 square, king to h2, d2, the pawn is 1 square away from promoting. Queen to d8, queen to h4, hits the king, king to g1, queen to f4, and now here, Hikaru, he does his best to continue the attack, queen to h8, but again, too little, too late. Queen h8, king g5, queen g8, king to h4, queen d5, and now here, Magnus, it's his turn. Queen d3, hits the king, king to h2, queen to e5 check, forces the queens off the board, but Hikaru, he's not done. g3 defends the attack with the check against the king. The queen stay on for now. Queen g3 hits the king, king to h1, queen e1, king to g2, queen e2. And in this position, there's simply nothing to defend against the idea of d1 promoting to a queen. And for that reason, right here, Hikaru Nakamura, after busting out all the tricks to try and save the game, including g3, blocking the check with a check of his own, he's forced to resign on the spot to Magnus Carlsen and his ridiculous greatest troll opening ever, the Alekhine's opening. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please show me some love, smash that like button, comment down below what you thought of the game, and so on. I really do appreciate that. And by the way, if you are tired of watching endless chess YouTube videos, be them mine or anyone else's, and you're just not making the progress you want to make with your online chess, trust me, I know the feeling and I have the solution. Personally, I was stuck at 1,100 ELO for the longest time, but once I finally figured out how to actually improve in online chess, I went from 1,100 to over 2,000 ELO on chess.com in literally just 7 months. It's all documented. And my students at my free online community, drmikechess.com, are getting insane results, like Umar, who literally gained 400 ELO in the month of August 2025 alone. If you want results like that, go to drmikechess.com. I have group coaching there, courses for you, a community there for you, literally everything you need to succeed and finally get the results that you want. And trust me, if you join there, I'll make it my personal mission to help you reach whatever goals you have with your online chess journey. So that's all I got for today. And as always, I wish you the best of luck with your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And God bless. And I will see you in the next video.